How do you define success and how do you create your own path in law school, even in an institution that wasn't necessarily built for you? How can you create your own success and forge your own pathway in law school? Today, I am so excited because I am joined by Lauren Williams. Lauren Williams is a second-year associate at Paul Weiss in the corporate finance department. Originally from Huntington, New York, Lauren graduated from Temple University in 2016 with a degree in sociology. She then pursued her legal career and started at Harvard Law School in 2016, where shortly thereafter she became the president of the Harvard Black Law Students Association. She was also named Chapter Leader of the Year in 2019. In addition to BLSA, Lauren was an active member of the Women's Law Association, and she was an active member of the Harvard Law School Parody, which is where Lauren and I became close, where we both danced and choreographed for the annual law school musical. So Lauren, I am so excited to have you here today.
Hi, Sydney. I'm very, very happy to be here with you today.
I first just want to thank you, first off, because I know that being an associate is very busy, very demanding. It's a lot of time. So I wanted to ask you, first and foremost, just tell us a little bit about ourselves. Tell us a little bit about yourself so we can get to know who you are as a person.
Oh, well, you started off with such a lovely intro. But besides, I guess, all of the wonderful things Sydney just said about me, I like to have fun. And I love music and dance, as we mentioned. So in my spare time, I try to do even little Zumba classes or just enjoy the arts. I think I'm in New York right now and things have been a little bit quieter because of COVID, but it seems to be that the city's coming back to life. So just getting out there, enjoying the arts, and also spending time with my two cats, Diana Ross and Wendy Williams.
I love that. I love that so much. I'm not a pet person, but I definitely can appreciate the soothing and comforting nature of pets, especially during the
Oh,
pandemic.
yes, definitely.
So let's go back to 1L year. And I know
Hmm.
that no one really likes to go back to 1L year. I mean,
No,
I would like to never really
never
think
again
about
in life.
1L.
But since
But
we're going to be there.
right, since we're going to be there and people are listening and are maybe preparing to go to law school either this fall or they're thinking about law school in the future and
Mhm.
maybe they're trying to get a sense of what it's going to be like to be a lawyer, what are some of the challenges and struggles that students encounter in their first year of law school? You know, talk to us a little bit about your first year of law school and maybe how that was impacted by being a woman of color.
Yeah. So 1L year was stressful. It is, I like to tell people that it's its own animal. Was nothing like my undergrad experience. I was accustomed to kind of just showing up to class and your professor had a particular set of ideas that they wanted to convey. And in many ways, you just kind of regurgitate what they said and you get your grade and you keep it pushing. That was not the case. There, you know, I I I hadn't had experience with this particular type of curriculum, and it felt like there was a lot of hiding the ball, a lot of legalese, a lot of reading work, tons and tons and tons of assignments. And I kind of felt like I was being thrown into the deep end and trying to doggy paddle and figure it all out on my own. Um, and I've had conversations with people about it because I felt like there were better ways to even convey the information during 1L. But a lot of professors and just people who have gone through the 1L experience, were just saying this is just how it is, and this is what I had to do. So in many ways, it felt like a hazing experience, in addition to just like law school experience. So I think once I was able to kind of understand that and frame it, and also just time, learning how to read a case, learning how to brief, learning how to read with intention and not just spend time passively marking up information that wasn't relevant or necessary. But it's this process that you have to go through and experience to get to the end.
I absolutely agree with you about the fact that I feel like when I started 1L, everyone just says, oh, 1L is the worst year of your life. You know, students who are older would say they wouldn't wish 1L on their worst enemy. And I know for me, I didn't really want to subscribe to that. I didn't
Yeah.
like the idea that,
Hmm.
oh, okay, this is just going to be a year where I suffer. I know that I
Yeah.
really tried to find fun. BLSA was really helpful for me for
Hmm.
that. What are some other ways that students can maybe try to find fun or be successful that year?
Yeah, and kudos to you for recognizing that. Like that is definitely something that I wish I had known starting law school, that like it can be its own experience. It doesn't have to be this very stressful, intense time. You could get involved. And I think one of my refuges was BLSA, as you said, getting involved in student organizations, just finding like-minded people that you can talk to about law school with, but also just like not talk about law school with. I had a couple of friends who were in Vino, which was like the wine club, and they just would go to on random Wednesdays, just go like drink wine together
I
and
forgot about that.
decompress. And I was like, yeah, like that. I was like, now looking back, I was like, why didn't I do that? Like
I
it
don't
was a
know why
great
I didn't
time
do
to
that
just,
either.
yeah, just drink wine. They'd have a whole party in like the whatever student org room. So I think like finding community. I regret not doing parody 1L year. That was one of
Also,
my big
regret.
regrets.
Same
Like
here. Have that.
once
Same
I
regret.
yeah, once I found that community in 2L year, I was like, oh, these people would have been great for me to just have this outlet to express my interest and remind myself of who I was before I came to this school, because you can kind of just become enveloped in this universe. So I think finding your joy and passion and feeling comfortable pursuing those things, even if people are too scared or the environment seems to tell you otherwise.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, I think that's so key because I think everyone in their first year, they're just trying to find their people. And
Yeah.
I came straight through from undergrad. I know you
Mm-hmm.
took a couple of years off, and I was really young when I started. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that was the biggest thing for me is, I was newly 21 and
Yeah.
everyone was basically 24. And I was in a new city. I'd never lived in a city before. And it
Yeah.
was just, new classes, new professors, new style of learning. It's just like, okay, where do I fit into all of this? Like, who are my
Yeah.
people? Like, do I
Mm-hmm.
like you guys? So much
Yeah,
there.
and it's not like we were really in a city that had like a lot to do or really explore too. So the community aspect was very, very important, like within the school.
Absolutely. Are there any parts of your experience? I mean, I know we're both black women, but are there any parts
Hmm.
of your experience that you feel like were different because you were a woman of color that maybe, would have been different if you were not?
Yeah, I think it was challenging. I think being a black woman, you're sort of consistently dealing with like this experience of invisibility. Like even as a child, I would find myself trying to count how many black women are in films, and it's still this kind of silly game that I do just to point out how invisible we are in society. And I think those same issues that you experience in just the regular world are also like the same issues that you experience in law school. Like it felt really strange that we're learning all the issues of sometimes like contract law or like certain even elements of civil procedure, and like race is very much implicated and gender is very much implicated, but it's like we just completely gloss over the topic. And some people will raise those issues to the professor, and I've heard them say either like completely dismiss it or acknowledge the point but claim that this isn't the venue or we don't have the time, and that'd be a great point. And it feels like your experience is like being dismissed. Like I remember reading one particular case, and it was some civil procedure issue or some random issue, but like reading the case, I could tell that the women in the case were poor black women living in like Chicago projects. And like to me that was a very important part in the case and how we interpret and understand it. But like that fact wasn't relevant. Like it just didn't matter. And I also remember a time when my professor was trying to teach, like, stand your ground, like, divorced from the issue of race. And this is obviously post Trayvon Martin. And I raised my hand, like, we can't have a conversation about this legal doctrine without discussing race. It was really
Absolutely.
difficult for me at times. And then even in, like, criminal law, we had we have, of course, we have, like, the rape discussion. And then, like, I remember once arguing in class about the concept of consent, and, like, having to deal with that over and over again. And, like, in this particular environment where you're surrounded by people that will be making decisions
Yeah.
that define, like, our legal framework and will implicate our lives. And, like, it was just, at times it felt overwhelming that I had to just,
Yeah.
like, step back and, like, self-care. But I will say sometimes, at least I had one professor in particular that did a decent job. And he made it a point one day and was like, we're just going to talk about racism, and
Yeah.
we're not co-calling. No one's talking today. I'm talking today. So I appreciate there are people that there exist, but I think it's our role to call these out, call these issues out as much as possible, and just try to find community, because it can be very challenging.
Absolutely, because I think that also highlights the importance of us actually being in the classroom as much
Yes,
emotional
precisely.
tax as it is. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if we weren't in the classroom, there would be no one to call out the
No.
fact that we're avoiding race or avoiding gendered issues or avoiding
Mm-hmm.
how, marginalized or minoritized people's voices are being completely erased
Correct.
by the laws. I mean, we have to be there to continue to speak up for those people in the classroom so that we can shape the voices and the mindset of our peers who, like you said, are going to be legislators.
Yep.
So
Precisely.
you talked a little bit about, taking a step back sometimes, but I
Mm-hmm.
did want to talk to you about a time when you really took a step forward and really leaned
Yes.
in. Maybe, as
Yes.
Sheryl Sandberg would say, you leaned. So,
Yes.
Harvard Black Law Student Association is one of the largest Black Law Students Associations in the country. It's an award-winning Black Law Student Association. It won Chapter of the Year from the National BLSA in 2018 and Chapter of the Year from the Northeast BLSA in 2019. And you were president of the Black Law Students Association. Talk to me a little bit about your experiences as the president of the Harvard Black Law Student Association. What was that experience like?
Yes, that was a very, very interesting experience. I think you highlighted, when you were talking about, like, the numbers and the size of the organization, that really make it its kind of this unique animal. We all often joked around that we were running a small nonprofit, because that's truly how it felt. Like, there were tons in committees. We had, like, upwards of, like, 100 members, and, like, that doesn't
Budget?
include budgeting. Like, I I it's funny because I talk to people about how stressful, like, big law can be, being, like, a big law associate. And I was like, it didn't, at least for me, like, it pales in comparison to, like, doing that for a year, like, having to manage people. But it was also such, like, a rewarding experience. And, like, seeing the work that we were able to do with communities in Roxbury, or, like, being able to support our own students, and standing up for issues that are often, things can get divisive, but, like,
Yeah.
taking a stand and learning about our own voices and how we can mobilize ourselves. It was truly a rewarding experience that, to this day, informs the way I approach my work, but also, like, just life generally.
Yeah. And talk to me about how you became president. If someone is listening and they're like, "Oh my goodness,
Mm-hmm.
what did she do to get
Mm-hmm.
there?" How do you get yourself involved in a Black Law Student Association?
Yeah, so I can kind of take you back to 1L year, as we were discussing, like trying to get involved, like I was also searching for community in the middle of Cambridge, Massachusetts. Like I was fortunate enough that I went to undergrad in a city that was like had a strong Black community and population just in Philadelphia, and was definitely seeking that in Cambridge. And I was like, this is a very different experience. Like I could tell as soon as I got to the city. So it was really important to me to find that community. So I got involved as a 1L, which if you have the time, and I think you do, if you can find the time,
You
even
can
if it's a
always
little
find
bit
the
of time,
time.
you can find the time,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, if you can find time to go to parties on the weekend, you can find time to do this. But I got involved as a 1L, and I joined the 1L committee, which was very like low commitment. I think we planned like a brunch for us, and we got these cute little matching t-shirts. Like it wasn't anything super involved, but it was enough that I was able to find and build community and like see what the potential of like what the organization could do, or like what you could do as a member. So I did that. And then I was really interested and engaged in that experience. So I was like, well, I'm a 2L. Let me like take a bigger step. So for us, we have all these committees. So it's natural for people oftentimes to get involved in some capacity, which may be the same for your chapter. I would say first step is get involved.
Yeah.
For me, I took a second step, which wasn't, I went from being a committee member on my 1L committee to being a committee chair.
Which is where I
So
stopped.
yes, so some people
I was
have
social
decided
chair.
they were
That was good.
like, but me, I needed more. So I ran we called it home committee, and we were essentially responsible for like the onboarding process for 1Ls. We have an annual retreat at Martha's Vineyard, so we planned that, which was definitely a large undertaking. And then like we did some more like 1L centered events overlapping with other committees. So that's kind of like what we did. And again, really enjoyed the experience, got to see more how the organization ran. Like we had board meetings to attend, and like budgeting, and like all sorts of other things that I don't think people necessarily would think would come with like a student organization.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of like behind the scenes work that we had to do. So from that point, I think once I got really threw myself into the organization for the committee chair, and I really cared and wanted to continue serving, I then ran for president, and then served as president my 3L year. I'll say, talking to other people from other chapters, it seems to be the case that more people are president their 2L year and tend to step back. I think it's just kind of the nature of how our organization runs, that we have all these large committees. But I think the basic step is just get involved, do something, ask people, see how the organization runs, and like just get involved.
Yeah. What would you say? Because even though someone might be listening and think, oh, okay, it's just a student group, the Black Law Students Association. I mean, it really is the group that is housing the Black future lawyers of tomorrow, right? Like these are all of the Black legal academic minds, for the country. So it's kind of, it's a larger deal than it might sound like when you just think, oh, it's a student club. How can other schools maybe strengthen their Black Law Students Associations so that they are, these powerhouses? I know that this is something that prospective students that I work with are always trying to see, well, how strong is the BLSA? Is there someone I can contact if I want to know what the students are like, if I want to know the atmosphere? But sometimes they don't find as much information as they'd like. So what can schools do, or what can other BLSAs do at other chapters to make that strong impact?
Yeah, I think it's important. Like to me, engagement is like the key. Like whether you have honestly, like you could have a group of like 20 people, and if those 20 people were involved and committed, like you could have a stronger BLSA than say someone who had like 60 members, right? So I think key is like engagement. So you need to figure out like what it is that your members want or your community is looking for, and being responsive to that. And it's difficult because I do think it shifts from year to year. Like sometimes you have people who are really interested in like being a political voice and like speaking up on political issues. Some people are really looking for academic support in their year, and they're like, we need an outline bank. We want professor reviews. We want to have these exam sessions, right? And then you have some people who are just like, I want to party. Like I came here, I want to party with Black people. Like that's what I'm interested in. So I think the first step is like figuring that out. So either through surveys or talking to people, communing with people. And then at that point, using whatever resources you have or leaning on your institution and say like, hey, we have these people, these people have demonstrated interest in XYZ things, and lean on the institution to then provide you with the resources, because it's their job to serve their students. And you're kind of this liaison between the two. Like that's your role truly, is to represent the needs of your community.
What questions would you suggest that prospective students ask other bosses as they're trying to build their school list and find their fit? Who should they get in contact with? And are there any red flags, if they see something that maybe that's not a school where they're going to be supported?
Yeah, I think as far as contacting them, I would at this point go through like the social media channels. I think a lot of the big orgs at this point have a social media or at least presence in some capacity, like the Instagram. I know we have a very active Instagram page. Someone was running it and manning it. So I think you're more likely to get a response quickly there. But also if you search or do a quick Google search, a lot of schools also have pages, like web pages, and there is a committee, at least for us, whose job it actually was to interface with students or prospective students and ask them questions. So I just reaching out to people, and people are often very responsive. And again, there should be someone whose job it is to talk to you. And if not, then maybe that's a suggestion for the committee, or sorry, for the organization when they're trying to figure out how to strengthen. That's something that you should consider. And then secondly, like, I guess to me, red flags would be like, again, it's an issue of engagement in programming. So I would ask the chapter, or this particular chapter, what kind of programming do they have? What do they do? Is there a wide array of events? Do people attend the events? Like, to me, that's kind of the key. If the chapter doesn't have consistent programming that's engaging for the members, then I don't think you're going to have a strong BLSA regardless. Like, people have to want to come out for whatever it is that you're doing.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. And kind of shifting now from what BLSAs can do, what can schools do to strengthen the support that they give Black students, maybe in addition to or regardless of what the BLSAs are doing?
Yeah, this is a really great question. I think something that I've learned after my experience at the school is that I think a lot of the tone of what is being taught and of the institution generally is in the hands of the professors, like as individuals. So I think it's a very tricky kind of balancing, like when you're dealing with the dean, but there's a kind of this community of professors who decide everything. But finding a way to put pressure on the institution to not only like put pressure on the professors, but sorry, I'm trying to think about this one.
You're good.
It's up to the professors to set the tone on like issues, like certain political issues, in particular race. And I think you should put pressure on the institution and also the professors to like talk about these issues. And also, I think a lot of professors in particular now, they claim to be like allies. They purport to support certain causes. But oftentimes, as we've discussed earlier, when it comes to the classroom, like they don't discuss these things or they gloss over them. And I do think we should expect the institution to put pressure on these people, which again is a challenge because you're dealing with like tenured professors who are like, I do what I want. This is my pedagogy. But we do need to find ways to make sure that the institutions ensure that we are discussing these things and that the professors are supporting our causes as well.
I think that the conversation of professors really being at the forefront of the atmosphere that the law school provides is really interesting because oftentimes the conversation about tenure, which has so many benefits, but also has so many drawbacks. Most of that conversation is centered at the undergraduate level, and we don't really think about what it's like at the graduate level, specifically what it's like at the law school level, because, I mean, I love some of my professors, but some of them were quite old. And probably were maybe done teaching, as lovely as they are. And we don't think about, okay, sure, that might be fine if you're getting your PhD in, history or, comparative religion. But when you're talking about the law, which is living and breathing and changing, and you're shaping young minds who are going to make laws, the question of tenure really does become very interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. I remember one class, I was a professor similar to the people that you've described. And he's like, we're going to talk about this new, like cutting edge, groundbreaking case. So we're like so excited. And he's talking about the O.J. Simpson trial.
Amazing.
And we were like, okay, sure. But like, I mean, this is almost 30 years ago at this point. Like, and then we're talking about so much has happened. Like, so much has happened with regards to our legal system and race, and like that is a completely separate universe and environment. Like, it was strange. And then I was like, at this point, there are probably people in the classroom who weren't even alive when that was going on.
Yeah.
So
no, that's very real.
So groundbreaking and new.
Not quite. One of my favorite classes. I won't say which one because I love this professor dearly. But it was a seminar, and he's older, close to 90, and he could only really hear out of one ear. But in the middle of our seminar, it was so lovely. In the middle of our seminar, we had wine and cookies. And he could take half a glass of wine and some cookies. And basically, like, not a lot happened after, like, the mid wine period. And I remember thinking, this is such a lovely class. He really, like, probably should retire. But this is such a lovely class. Which, it wasn't...
cookies.
Listen, I really enjoyed that class. It was a Tuesday from 5 to 7. I just had to make it to 6 o'clock.
Well, that's a good evening class, then.
Yeah,
that's solid. Because those evening classes, ooh, there were days where I was like, it's snowing outside, and I just want to be in my house, watching TV.
Yeah, it's hard to get out of class. I mean, sometimes, we talk about what is the 1L schedule like, or even the 2L, 3L schedule like. It is unpredictable. It's like, sometimes you get out of class at 2 o'clock, sometimes you get out of class at 8 o'clock. I mean, it just depends.
Correct.
Switching a little bit, though, from law school to your life right now, which maybe has its own level of unpredictability at times.
Oh, goodness.
I'd love for you to talk to us a little bit about what you do, because I often tell students, right, they need to have a clear reason for why they want to go to law school, but that's often hard because they don't really have an idea of what lawyers do. And even we throw around corporate law. But, like, what does that mean? So can you, like, break it down? Or, like, what is it that you do? What's your job? What's, like, you're probably not 9 to 5. So what does your day look like? What can people expect?
Yeah, so I'll say I do corporate work. And if I'm being honest, not a lot of law school really prepared me for this. I think it's a universal thing that we all discuss because it's kind of its own animal. If you want to do corporate work, I suggest taking corporations and showing demonstrated interest. Like, so you have some background, but I do think like you're going to have to learn this when you start on the job. but it's my day-to-day experience. Okay. I can speak more about kind of like what my first year experience was, because I left kind of like midway through, right when I switched to my group. I temporarily left the firm to work for a client. So I can speak more to kind of what the first year experience was. But we were unassigned in our corporate group. So I got to try assignments from all our different corporate departments. So I was working for our private equity funds. I was supporting our financing team. I was working for an M&A team, and just really dipping and dabbing and understand the ins and outs. A lot of what I was doing was kind of like reviewing contracts and processing agreements. I also think as a first year, you end up doing a lot of like the first year and second year, just as a junior associate, you do a lot of grunt work. So sometimes you end up getting that tough research assignment that nobody wants to do or understands. And they're like, hey, Lauren, can you look this one up? And you're like, sure. I've had to process signature pages. It's really kind of runs the gamut. And it's very, at times it can feel like very inconsistent. Once I switched in the group, I think I had like more predictability over what my actual work was doing. A lot of what we were doing was supporting the M&A team. Like when they have like a big M&A deal, like somehow like someone's going to have to pay for this deal. Like there's a process and how like the money, like how it's being paid for and supported, like whole money flow. So like my team's job was like to help support that part of the transaction. So there's certain documents that have to be drafted in connection with those types of transactions. So that's kind of like what I started doing. I think for a lot of people, if you're in corporate, you're either going to, as a first year, you might have like that general experience where you're just doing all sorts of things and just getting your feet wet, and you don't really have grounding until you pick a group, or they have you on a rotation, which I think actually might be more the norm at a firm, where you work for a group for like a specific set of time and then you switch into another group. And I think you'll do it maybe like 3 or 4 times. And at the end of the rotation, you determine which group you want to be in. As far as hours go, my hours are very unpredictable. The only predictable thing is that they tend to be long. Like truly. Um, you'll find that, especially if you're in New York big law, it's just, there's a serious grind in the work that you're doing. Like I've gotten emails at, I'll say like 7 p.m. and they're like, hey, we just got this big dump of documents that need to be reviewed by 7 a.m. tomorrow. So you've got like 800 documents. Here you go, Lauren, have fun. And you're like, well, I thought I was going to consider, but like, I guess this is what I'm doing. That tends to be like, those moments were rarer, but they do happen. And you're kind of always prepared for that to happen. Like I always say I'm always on call, even on the weekends. Like you can get an email on a Saturday and then you're like, well, I guess I'm going back home today. Like can't go to the movies today. But I think once you get into your groups, you can find the groove and you'll kind of know, well, I know I'm on a deal that's closing. It's aiming to close on this Monday. So I'm expecting my weekend will be busy this weekend. It's still unpredictable, but I think you can kind of at least somewhat gauge the more and more you do it. But I've also had some days where it's a Tuesday and I have nothing to do. And I remember talking to an associate and I was panicking as a junior, because your workflow tends to be very inconsistent when you're a junior. And I'm like, well, what do I do? I reached out to assigning, because we have there's a team that assigns us like our work. And I think it's kind of silly now that I actually emailed this woman, but I was like, I have nothing to do. And she's like, well, there's no work now. And someone told me like, enjoy the downtime that you have, because when you're busy, you're busy. And was completely right when she told me that. So I think you just have to throw yourself into it, and you'll learn it, the workflow and style when you get there. But it is very demanding, and I would be lying to you if I told you otherwise.
Do you find it difficult to meet like billable hours or to adjust to that? I was only at a firm for a very short amount of time. Not as not as big, you know, I was at a small private litigation
Mm-hmm.
family firm, but we had billable hours, right? I mean, all firms have
Mm-hmm.
billable hours.
Yeah.
So what was that like? And then was it any different being a woman of color at the firm?
Yeah. Well, I'll say the one nice thing about my firm, and I didn't know this when I was picking firms, but I was glad to know that afterwards, was that we don't have billable hour requirements for like bonus and all the end of the year stuff. So like it's there. I think there's a target that they want for us,
Yeah.
but at least for me, I didn't feel that same pressure, though I think at least it was maybe different for the litigation associates, but post COVID, there was a lot of market, like not post COVID. We're still very much in it, but we're the markets. There was a time where like everything was completely shut down.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
once things started to open back up, things were insane. Like work was nuts, and I was definitely on track to surpass my hours when I was at the firm. And though as a first year, I think it's a bit more difficult because your just workflow is inconsistent. So I think it can be, if that's something that your firm requires, I think it can be more difficult as a first year to hit those requirements. But I do think that if you're at your standard firm, you should be on track to do that. And if you're not on track, then there's like something going on that's, I wouldn't even say is like your fault. Like there's an institutional issue. People aren't giving you work. Like there are other things happening, because from what I can tell, there's more than enough
There's
work
enough work.
to go around. Yeah, like it's there. So either they're not giving it to you, which is like something's going on, or I can't, or you're just a first year and you're still kind of integrating yourself into the ecosystem.
Yeah, I know. For me, it was a learning process, like learning to track all of my hours. I think that's, where a lot of first years maybe lose some of their hours. Is just like not capturing everything, not running
Yes,
the timer, not,
you
I just lost
run the
hours.
timer. This is my approach. I'm like, if I'm taking time out of my day to think or do anything that's for this job, because that's what I'm being paid for, my time. Like if I'm not doing my little Zumba classes or playing with my cats, then like I am working for you. And it's really up to the partner on your team to write off your time or manage it that end. It is not your job to decide that. So
Yeah,
I would, or whenever you get to that point, bill it. Like bill everything, and then
always
let
be
them tell
billing.
you that's not billable, or that's not okay, cool. Now that I know that, but no, bill
Yeah,
it.
no, absolutely. Listen, always be billing. That's
Always be billing. Always
that's
be
what
billing.
my colleague and I used to say that at the firm all the time. You billing? Yep, we billing.
Yep.
What's your favorite thing about being a lawyer, Lauren?
I think this sounds kind of corny, but I like the opportunities that I've had, like being able to work on a deal or see something on like CNBC and say that I did that. It was like one thing I did, it was for Kraft, it was Deal for Kraft. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like I'm doing this thing for this company that I know. And I think it might be part of like the performer artist in me that like likes being a part of like things that have recognition. But like the coolest thing that I got to do is like it was actually one of my pro bono clients. Like I got to work for, support the Shabazz Center and all the initiatives that they're doing. And as a kid, my dad was a big fan of Malcolm X, and I had like a little Malcolm X picture in the house growing up. So to be able to work with that institution and support them and all the really cool, interesting things that they were doing, it was definitely like a full circle moment, and also to be able to share that with my father. Like, of all the things that I've done in my legal career, like, and probably will do, like, that was like the proudest moment. So I think those opportunities, not only like really cool clients, but also using like the tools and skills you do to do meaningful work as well.
I love that. I love that so much. My last question for you is just, do you have any other advice for aspiring attorneys as they're trying to create their path, forge their path, figure out what their path is going to be in law school or in their legal career?
Yes, I have a piece of advice that one of my professors shared with our section right before we were going to march towards the dark abyss that is your first, fall semester finals. So this is your first like final exam in law school. So he had us all, we're all in this after this review section. Everybody's anxious and like stressed out. And he, gave us the speech, you're all going to do well, do whatever you want, yada, yada, yada. But he said the most important thing is to define what success means for yourself. And that completely shifted my perspective on law school. Because as we've discussed earlier, I think there is a tide. There's a tide that you will feel when you get there. There's going to tide that will push you to do or try things that maybe you wouldn't be interested in doing, right? Like, I know people that in their heart, they weren't interested in writing on for law review, but that's what you do when you're in law school. But it wasn't in their heart. And I think this extends even, beyond just like the law school experience. It's about being comfortable with making decisions that make you happy. And again, just defining success for yourself. So just, again, self-care. And if success for me at one point was like, I want to choreograph a musical, right? That made me happy, and that's totally okay. And I think someone else at law school would be like, this is a ridiculous choice. Why would you do this? You're supposed to be clerking for whatever judge. And if you want to do that, that's fine. But it's also okay if you don't. And I just urge you all to continue that and keep that perspective and let it guide you as you embark on law school and also as you begin your careers.
Lauren, thank you so much for that. I also 100% agree that success is the path that you choose for yourself. It's how you define it, because if you are just following someone else's rule book, if you're just listening to what anyone else tells you, you're not really going to become that self-actualized professional that you were meant to be. You will end up realizing that you're living someone else's dream.
That's
and
right.
that you haven't lived up to your own potential because you haven't given yourself the freedom to think outside of the box or to step outside of the line. And that's where I think true greatness really happens. Well, Lauren, thank
Love
you
it.
so much for being here. Hopefully we can have you back again
Would
at some
love to be
time.
back.
Yes, I'm sure people will have questions. So we'll make sure that, if you have questions, definitely put them in the comments. I just thank you, like I said, thank you for your time and your generosity today. And we can't wait to see you back soon.
Yes, and thank you for having me.
Of course. So thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, if it was inspiring to you at all, definitely make sure that you share this video, send it to your friends. Of course, you already know the drill. Make sure that you hit like and subscribe to get your notifications for when we send out new videos. If you're listening to the podcast, make sure that you rate and review. Also send it to your friend, and we cannot wait to see you back here next time.